Welcome to Happy Crappy Paints, part number 12, where we paint the hyenas. That's the end result. I'm not super happy how these turned out. They didn't have a lot of detail except on the face, so they weren't that much fun to paint, and I didn't have any really good ideas how to do it. But I did start with a white primer, per usual. I decided I wanted a light felt color, so I mixed Ushabti Bone with Zandri Dust, about 50-50, to create a really light color for the fur. Mixed it with plenty of water to not lose the little detail that do exist on the model. The reason I wanted a really light fur color as the base was that I intended to use a number of washes to get that brown, black, spotty look that hyenas have. I did not paint the bright or the light fur color all the way up to the hair that stands up on his back, and I also took special care not to get any paint inside of the hyena's mouth. There's lots of small little teeth in there. I don't want to have too much paint on it, so that to lose any of the details. So that's how they all look after applying the first base coat or base layer of paint. Using XV88 for the longer hairs of the fur. You don't have to be super careful when applying this paint. Do try to get a quite distinct line between the long hairs and the very short fur on the back of the hyena. Other than that, most of the detail is going to be covered, or any mistakes you make here going to be covered by the washes you apply. I did try to get around the hyena's face to paint little triangles, if you wish, towards the face to make it look a little more interesting. You'll see it shortly here. Try and paint all of the longer hairs in this darker brown. Also extend outside of the long hairs to get the impression that the brown long hair is hanging down from his hips and then further down to the leg, onto the leg. Here you can see I'm trying to add a little detail to his face on the fur. Emperor's Children for the mouth. This is as you can imagine, quite a strong pink color. It's going to have a nice flesh shade after applying a wash. Gonna see that soon. Don't worry painting over the teeth there. Apply a good wash with Agrax of the full mini, all of it. The only place you need to take a little bit of care is around the face. Do not apply it as richly to the face as for the rest of the body. Do try and fill the ears completely with wash. You want the inside of the ears to be very dark, almost black. You can see that I'm also taking some of the wash away where it had pooled a little too much. Using Reikland Fleshshade for the inside of the mouth. Make sure you cover the outside of the gums as well. Using Nuln Oil to darken the top edges of the fur on the hyena's back and also the inside of the ears. As well as the tip of the hair underneath the hyena's stomach and also the tip of the tail. I did add a little bit on the feet. I don't know if that actually made any real effect, so that's definitely something you can either add a second layer of or ignore completely as you wish. Using a dry brush of Zandri Dust to bring or highlight the hyenas back up again after the wash. Applying a little extra dry brush to the extended front leg, since it's a little bit more or out of the shade from underneath the hyena's body. I'm going over the whole hyena with this dry brush. You could pick a lighter shade for the longer fur if you want it to be a little more bright, or the contrasts to be brighter. So that's how it looks before we start to add the details. I'm going to start painting the teeth. The teeth might look difficult, but they were actually quite easy to paint. Just a couple of very light dabs with a 5/0 brush. Just dots, really small dots, for the back teeth, and it goes quick, and it was quite not not that hard. I thought it was going to be more difficult than it actually was. Do remember to clean the brush, because the paint dries quickly on the brush. So that do clean your brush between the hyenas. Also use some water if needed to moisten the brush a little bit, so making the paint come off nicely from the brush. I decided to use Screaming Skull for the claws. I didn't want the claws to be very bright. You could use Ushabti Bone as well as Screaming Skull, or add a little bit of ceramic white to Ushabti Bone to make Ushabti a little lighter. So Screaming Skull is optional. Abaddon Black for the lips and nose of the hyenas. This helps accentuate the mouth, making the hyena look more fierce. This was a little tricky, using a 5-0 brush again to make a very thin line around the mouth. This really adds to the face of the hyena, making it look quite nice. I also added a little bit of black to the tips of the ears. Going to go back and add more black to the tips of the ears and also the hairs on the hyena's back when we do the base. You can get to see that later. For the first mini, I actually continued painting the hairs and the tip of the tail at this stage, but I realized that it was going to be easier to do with a bigger brush, and I decided to do it when I was doing the base. Ceramic white for the eyes. We're going to paint a black line, thin line around the eyes, so it doesn't matter if you go a little bit outside here. I'm going to add a black line. So here we are adding contours around the eyes. This can be tricky. This is also a step where it's important that you, between the hyenas, wet the brush and clean it, and then dip the brush a little bit again in the black paint, just because it dries so quickly on your brush and it does not come off easily on your mini once it starts to dry. So do one of the hyenas, clean the brush, and then next one. As you can see, you use the black line to shape the eyes. I decided to add a black slit for the irises as well. It's hard to see here, but a very thin black line using a 5-0 brush works really well. And we're almost done with the details. So just as you're painting the base black, at the end when you are almost running out of paint in your brush, move over to adding a little bit of black towards the tip of the tail, and also the tip of the ears and the tips of the hairs on the back of the hyena. As well as the hair on the back of his legs, front legs as well. You'll see see that soon here. And also under his chin there. Add a seal or seal your paint with the matte varnish, and then add a gloss varnish to the mouth and nose to make it look wet. And now we're done. I decided to add a little bit of a blood effect. This is very much optional. So using the usual blood mix of X27 and Agrax, I decided to add a little bit of blood around the mouth. I did not want to overdo it, so just outside of the lips a little bit, over the nose, since I imagine that the hyena burrows its face into their victims while eating. I did not add any blood to the inside of the mouth. I wanted the teeth to be white and bright. I did add blood to the paws of one of the hyenas. I decided I did not really like the look of that, so I only did that on one of them. But it's up to you how much blood effect or blood you want to add. I suggest going for a very minimalistic look in terms of blood effects. And that's it. We're done with the hyenas. That's how they look when we're all done. See you next time. Thanks for watching.